Today is March the 25th. Is salvation important? Let's find out together as we read about Jesus' ministry in the Gospel of Luke. Today, reading through the Bible in a year, I'd like you to read from Luke chapter 9, verse 46 through chapter 10, verse 24. It's a short passage. The first two paragraphs are actually parallel passages of what we read yesterday. But starting in verse 51, we see that Jesus was rejected by the Samaritans as he traveled through Samaria. Why? Because Luke chapter 9, verse 51 says, as the time drew near for him to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Literally, Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem. Although he was still in Judea and then traveled into Samaria, Jesus was very obviously going to Jerusalem. The Samaritans didn't like that. Now, it's interesting that Luke uses a different dividing point. Matthew and Mark use Peter's confession of Jesus as the Messiah to divide their Gospels into two parts. Luke uses this verse. Luke is much more focused on location. In fact, here, Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem, and you begin to see a number of different references to locations. So in chapter 10, Jesus calls 72 to go ahead of him on a missionary tour, and Jesus begins to call out the names of the towns that they will visit. He calls out Chorazin and Bethsaida. He calls out Sodom. He mentions Tyre and Sidon. He mentions Capernaum. Luke focuses, for whatever reason, on geography. We see in this passage some who come to Jesus asking to follow him. Jesus literally turns them away with some very, very simple statements that indicate that at times it's difficult to follow Jesus. Then he calls 72 and he sends them out. They go out, and when they come back in verse 17, Luke 10:17, when the 72 disciples returned, they joyfully reported to him, "Lord, even the demons obey us when we use your name." They had a successful ministry. They preached the kingdom of God, but also they were able to heal the sick, cast out demons. Jesus, in responding to them, verses 18 to 20, says, "Yes. And I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. I've given you authority over all the power of the enemy. You can walk among snakes and scorpions. You can crush them." Remember the promise that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. Nothing will injure you. But don't rejoice because evil spirits obey you. Rejoice because your names are registered in heaven. Jesus goes on. He prays a prayer of thanksgiving. And then in verse 23, when they were alone, he turned to the disciples and he said, "Blessed are the eyes that see what you've seen. I tell you, prophets and kings long to see what you see, but they didn't see it. They long to hear what you hear, but they didn't hear it." Jesus looks at his disciples And he says, this moment in history is unique. People for millennia have wanted to see what you are seeing. They didn't. You're seeing it. Jesus was talking, of course, of his own ministry and how he would die on the cross to bring us salvation. Is salvation important? That's an odd question. Of course it's important. But you know, sometimes we just become used to it. Sometimes we don't give it a second thought. Take time today and recognize just how important it is. The disciples cast demons out of people. Jesus said, yeah, that's nice, but your name's written in heaven. Rejoice for that. Then he says, people wanted to see this for centuries. You get to see it. We live today in the blessings of salvation. Recognize that for what it is. Take time today and thank Jesus for bringing salvation to you. Please like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you used to listen to it. Enjoy this Sunday worshiping in the church of your preference.